Hello, this is Ashlyn, and today I'm going to be presenting my final Info 362 project. So all quarter we've been building and creating these infographics, and so I'm just going to go through and break down each of the aspects of my graphic that I created, and then how I brought it all together, etc. So this is my infographic. My topic was California Chrome. California Chrome is the richest horse in the world, so he's attended a bunch of different races and he's actually won over $14 million, which is outstanding. And I just felt really passionate about this project. I enjoy horses and horse racing, so I just felt compelled to create my project on this. And so in this infographic, you'll see I have a numbers display, a time display, location, relationship, and appearance. And I'm just going to be going through and breaking down each of those models that I created and talk about the different elements that I created within those and how I designed them based on other models that I've been emulating. So here in my appearance model, you'll see that I took an image of California Chrome and uploaded it into Illustrator so I could outline the entire thing, even every individual hair on the horse, and create a clipping mask so I could put it on a transparent background. And that took a lot of time and effort, but my goal here was to use a realistic image, as I'll show you in my visual language model. And I also added a shadow underneath. This is all based on the visual language. And the reason why I chose this as for my appearance model is I really wanted to use something that was eye-catching and interesting. And this specific photo I picked because I think the colors are exciting and interesting, as well as just the movement in the photo. I wanted to bring that actually into my own infographic. And I also just wanted to give a general idea of what this horse looks like so people might know better. So to emulate my visual language model, you'll see that there is a large realistic image in the center and also has that shadow beneath it, so that's why I added that shadow. And then you'll also see in my visual language that I have like some very simple silhouettes, but I felt using the realistic image was more exciting and interesting, and I wanted that kind of to be the centerpiece of my infographic. Now, I just want to point out the fact that this does go against my color model, and I felt in this situation I had to choose between emulating my visual language model and using that realistic image or using my color model. However, I did choose this color model because I felt that it fit with my image better. I had picked a couple other ones before previously, and I had felt that they looked odd with my photo because of the colors. So colors on California Chrome were the purple and green, and I felt any other color just looked odd and it made the picture seem to not fit. So that's, in the end, this is what the color model I chose was this, but I did have to go against my color model and use like the copper and browns and stuff like that in order to keep the emulation for my visual language. So here is my numbers display. And what I'm showing here is just basically the number of races that each of these horses have won compared to one another. So the kind of goal of this was to give my readers kind of a reference point of how well California Chrome competes. Some readers might only know about maybe Secretariat or Seabiscuit, or maybe they've recently heard about American Pharoah. And so that's why I kind of brought all of these really famous horses into this graphic, just to kind of give that reference point for some users who might not know that much about it. I also tried to kind of get the best out of this emulation model by taking some of those aspects of my visual language and just kind of creating a simple graphic that's easy to understand and easy to read right away. So for my visual language, you'll see that I mimicked the circles that they have here in this image. So they have like the days in these little circles, and I wanted to take those and I used those to show my numbers, so the amount of race wins. I also use the silhouette, so like you can see the little green frog here, like it's just a simple silhouette, and I use that to kind of just bring in some creativity and something a little bit interesting into the graphic. And then it would make it so it couldn't even stand alone. Like if you were just simply to look at the numbers graphic, you could understand kind of what I was talking about. Also, in order to make this a numbers model and to emulate this visual language, as this chart here increases by day, just like how mine increased by number of wins, you'll see that each image gets larger. So I did the same thing where the smallest horse had only won 8 races, where the largest one had won 16. So my encoding here was just using that size to represent amounts of wins. And then so for my color model, I used these purples and greens and I combined them both. And I think with mine, I did some kind of highlighting here by using the purple and then the white on top of it on that green, it kind of really made the numbers stand out. And the silhouettes weren't really taking over the graphic like I wanted. I wanted the numbers to be the thing that caught your eye, while the silhouettes would kind of lay in the back and just kind of be added decoration. But I did go against my model here. As you'll see, there's only probably 2 different colors in each of these graphics, where mine, because it had so many elements to it, I kind of didn't have a way to combine all those colors without losing sight. Like if I had used only the 2 greens, you wouldn't be able to see everything, or just white and purple, like you would start to lose some of the images here. And just because I had so much information on my graphics, I felt it was necessary to kind of go against the color model and create my own kind of color scheme here for this graphic. I did do some playing around with changing the colors, and I just couldn't get anything that would allow you to not only be able to see the graphic well, but to understand what was going on. Also for my text model, so I used the Avenir Next font for the headers and small paragraphs, and then the PT Sans Narrow for names. So if I go back here, you can see that the font on top and the little paragraph on the bottom is that Avenir Next font, where the names and the numbers on each of these were the PT Sans Narrow font. So with my relationship model, I chose to use the bloodlines of California Chrome, and kind of it's important in the horse world to know bloodlines, but then as well, I wanted to show how California Chrome is also a descendant from a couple other famous racehorses. So I really just kind of wanted to bring that out and give that point to my readers and use a couple different techniques to draw out that basic goal of these are some important figures in his bloodlines that I really want to pull out and show you guys. So I did this with using my visual language model. I used the dashed lines to connect all the different elements of my graph, and then I also used the banners that you can see in this image here. I also included, so I kind of took these little banners, like the frog and toad with the banners and the realistic image, but instead of a circle here, I used a horseshoe. So that was just kind of my own creative little input here, was to make a horseshoe, and it would match more with kind of the topic of my graphic. Some encoding I used was making the largest horseshoes the ones that were the most important, so they would draw your attention. And in earlier models, I had it where the size was the nearest to him, and then as they went up, they got smaller. But I think my main point was to have the largest horseshoes be the most important. So that was kind of the idea that I had behind this. And then I used some hierarchy by obviously placing California Chrome at the bottom. And then as you went up, you went further and further out and further into his bloodlines. So with my color model, I used down here where at the bottom, the green and purple combination to create the horseshoe with the banner. I used the green banners on top of the purple because I really wanted to draw out and draw some attention there. And I think I stuck to my model much better with this graphic, except I did start to deviate away from it when I actually put it into my final infographic with the purple background. But I felt like this was necessary. It was one of those compromises between my layout and my model, or my color model, sorry. And then I just wanted to point out the fact that my color model is semi-complementary, So they're purple and green are almost straight across from each other, but not quite on the color wheel. But basically, they're just kind of a nice contrast to each other and are kind of a cool look. And then for my text model, so once again, I used the same fonts in the same areas. The names were my identity labels here. And then I also added annotations, and I did these by drawing the dashed lines that you could see on the frog in my infographic to point to my object and then the annotated text. So here's my time model. And what I did is I took a typical day for race day for a horse, or specifically for California Chrome, and I made a clock. And so at the top I have 12 a.m. and as you go around the clock, you go through and see the sections of his day, starting with his day at 3 a.m. and around. And kind of what I wanted to do with this is I just wanted to bring to the attention of my audience how little time the horses actually spend racing. Whereas, and so I just kind of thought putting it on the circle really gives a big picture of like how little the time is that is spent doing that, with just kind of the ethical issues people are fearful of with horse racing. And I just wanted to show how well these horses are actually being treated. And with this, so I kind of again took the mimicking the banners of these little frogs in their little pictures, but I actually made this one more of a circle this time. However, I didn't make this one as much of an oval since it was a clock. I thought it would make it look distorted, or like more like the horseshoe where it's kind of an oval shape. I tried to make this one a full circle. And once again, I used the dashed lines to connect my text to some other side notes. So here's my color model again, and kind of how they have in this cup here. I used a color range from really light purple all the way up into these other lighter purples we see here. So as you increase through the day, so that was my encoding as well, was that as time increased and you went around the circle that the color darkened. And then I also wanted to make it easy to find where it starts. So there's obviously a very clear difference between the very light purple and the very dark purple. And then lastly I used the green. I included it in here as well to really highlight the time that he spent racing. Otherwise it wouldn't stand out as much, and I wanted it to really kind of pop in the reader to be curious about what is going on with the green line. And then with my text model, the same fonts, obviously. I used the PT Sans Narrow for the events on the wheel, so those are my identity labels. And I also use annotations again, so the same annotations with the dashed circles and lines. So my locations display was to show the different racetracks across the US. So these are kind of the most major ones. And then I wanted to point out the ones that Chrome has actually attended. So you can see that he's been to a couple on the East Coast, but he's mostly stayed in California, which is where he lives. And so I just kind of wanted to point out, just so people kind of have a general idea of like where these racetracks are, and some people might not even know that we have one in Washington. So to bring in my visual language model, I used a green map. However, I did not use a filled map because it's kind of impossible with cities. You can't really do a filled map. So what I tried to do was use the same circles that they used here and use those as the pinpoints of where my cities are. So I'd had to do a little bit of adjustment there. And I also added in the lines onto like the outlines of the states because I felt like it was important to be able to see where those were. So I had to deviate a little from my visual language model to make sure my message was clear. I also used my color model here by making the green states, and then I used the dark green to mark ones that Chrome hadn't attended, but then I used the purple, which is like in the lower part of my screen here of the color model, so the purple and light green together, to mark the ones that he'd actually attended. So I kind of did some encoding there and a little bit of highlighting by using the purple. The purple stands out more for the ones that Chrome had been to, and then also to show which ones he's attended and which ones he hasn't. Then for my text model, I used the Avenir Next font again for my header, and then the PT Sans Narrow for the labels for my legend, so where it says where he's been, or the green circle next to the races he hasn't attended, and then the purple one to the ones he had. So lastly here, I'm going to go over my layout model. So with my layout model, I had originally two different ideas of using the same frog model or to make it kind of something unique like the beetle one here. And this is the one that I ended up following them up with. So for visual hierarchy here, I created the large appearance model in the middle. And I really love this infographic because I really liked having that really large eye-catching image front and center. I also have a really large title. And then below that, I think the relationship model, it takes up most of this, or seems to take up most of the screen, takes up a pretty big corner of it. So those are kind of also the things I wanted to draw out the most. I really liked my relationship model, and I really liked the title and appearance. Then as far as color goes, I feel like my relationship model stands out really well with the dark purple. So it stands out, and then your eye is kind of attracted to the dark green. However, I felt like I did a good job of balancing that. So by putting the dark purples in the opposite corners, and then as well as the different greens in opposite corners. And then so you kind of cross both sections, and it kind of makes it um, even on the display. So not one corner is too heavy with color versus the other. And I really liked also with this how the purple and green really contrast from my appearance model. So the horse's brown coloring really stands out and looks really cool against it. So with the colors and shapes here, I felt like I brought in a lot of unity. So just having those similar colors. And then I think the types of shapes I use are all really very circular. So the horseshoes are a circle, the time, the spots on the map are a circle, and then as well as the numbers in the very top. So there's a lot of circular aspects here. And then I turned it up with some variety by using the colors in different ways and utilizing those to bring out different ideas. So in one model, like my time model, I have the green is a highlighter, whereas in the bottom corner of my map, the purple is a highlighter. So it just kind of brought in some variety that way. As well as with the images of the horses. I feel like the horses brought in their own kind of unique aspect. And then so with the layout and the alignment, so the appearance model is front and center. So that's kind of the first thing that catches your eye and probably the title. And then I felt you either want to go down to the relationship model or up to the green, and then lastly, or to my numbers model, and then lastly to the time and the maps and maybe some of these other like meet the jockey, and then maybe the little label at the bottom about the logo. I also really love the aspect of the layout model that they were overlapping. So someone kind of explained it in class as like it being kind of a clustered chaos, but it was all like very clean, like it was controlled chaos that we had here. And then also there's sort of an alignment, like you can kind of see how they're sectioned off. So there's one section on the right side, another at the top, etc. But I had a hard time here with this model particularly because I felt overall with my project that with any of my models and any of my graphics that I would have to I'd have to make a compromise somewhere. So here with my layout model versus my visual language model, I really had to make a compromise between my visual language, which is very clean and very organized, and bringing in more of the aspect of my layout model that was cluttered and overlapping. So I had a lot of compromise there as well as with the color model. So I had to compromise when it came to if I had a lot of objects in the screen, I couldn't limit my color model to only be one or two colors. And then I also really like this because it's just a lot of different shapes and sizes, which is really fun with this layout model. And thank you.